At my hometown, there was a house that got on that was on fire. 3 kids were locked inside the house, and then the 3 kids died. The parents were very upset. They were suffering quite a bit. Some of their relatives were monks from Larongar, and they went back to chant sutras for them, to chant for them. And I heard from those people that the relatives who were monks, who were ordained, are very different. They seem that they're sad and having tears, but they were chanting at all times. It is really because they've went through the Buddhism education. They understand that life is impermanent. If it were other relatives, other people who are not practitioners, they really couldn't face such event. The mother of the kids fainted from crying. So for people who So to these relatives, close relatives, the monastics then give them teachings about the previous karma and impermanence and so on. Therefore, for people who encounter suffering right away without any previous practice, it is not going to work right away if you take out the theory, because you've never practiced it. So if you listen to it many times, familiarize yourself with this kind of teaching for many times, and then whenever suffering occurs in your life, you will have stronger power to face those adversities. This is quite important. Without actual practice, without actual practice that you can use in your life, it is very difficult to transform suffering into path. This is important. If you've studied lots of Dharma, especially if you've studied the Mahayati teachings, and only take up on the words talking about luminosity and so on. For example, I met a renunciate before, and all he talked about is luminosity. He would say everything is luminosity. Everything is its natural, spontaneous manifestation. And once he had some big problems that occurred in his life, and he started crying every day. So I called him and said that, didn't you say it's all natural luminosity? It's all it's the non-dual luminosity and emptiness. Where is that understanding now? But he can't understand anymore. He couldn't uptake that anymore. He was crying in the phone. I can't talk too much about it because I don't want you to figure out who he was. Otherwise, he would be quite embarrassed. So anyhow, whenever for those people who talk about the non-duality of emptiness and luminosity, the natural wisdom, and so on, if you talk about that when you're happy, but when you're unhappy, you no longer talk about that anymore. This, I think you're grasping onto the theory. When you're happy, talking about emptiness and Maha'ati and so on is very easy, but whenever you encounter suffering to yourself, you will be able to see if it is a genuine practitioner or not, if that person has a genuine realization or not. You see it very clearly. And it all has something to do with whether you have a practice on a daily basis. Therefore, use suffering as basis for the following practice. Use suffering to train in renunciation. So suffering is very momentary, and we should transform it into the path. Over here, it listed a few in the text. It listed a few different methods to train yourself, and the first one is to use suffering to train in renunciation. And first, you need to sometimes you need to think in such a way. Sometimes, then use your suffering in order to train your mind in renunciation. Say to yourself, as long as I wander powerless and without any freedom in samsara, as long as you're in samsara, there is no freedom. There's all kinds of suffering. And it's not something unjust or unwarranted. It's simply the very nature of samsara. You can't think in such a way that, why me? I'm a good person. Why it happens to me? There's really no need to complain about it. At times develop a deep sense of revulsion by thinking, if it's already so hard for me to bear even a little suffering and pain of happy realms, and then what about the suffering of the lower realms? This is quite important. There are people who would practice renunciation once they feel suffering. As long as you're suffering, you will encounter all different kinds of pain. This is very natural in samsara. It happens it happens the different kind of pain and suffering, such as headache, surgery, being slandered, criticized, and humiliated even, or it may be health issues, and it may be conflicts between people. All of those sufferings are the sufferings that's scattered in our life. But those are scattered suffering, unlike the suffering that is continuously ongoing in hell realms. For example, you're unhappy today because you didn't eat well, you're just not in good mood, and you're having headache and so on. But all of those kind of sufferings compared to the suffering that happens in hell realm, let it be the realm of extreme coldness or hotness or hot, there is really no time to take a break. We have Sundays. We have Sundays to take a break, but in hell realm they have no Sundays. They have no holidays. They suffer from they're suffering at all times. So what if you reborn in those realms? What if you reborn in hungry ghost realm? What if you reborn in animal realm, compared to the suffering that is rather little and scattered in our life, the suffering that comes from other lower realms is more excruciating. Therefore, whenever suffering happens, especially this time during the pandemic, it's been so long already, it must be very painful for lots of people. And maybe because of that, you may generate some genuine renunciation. I I often think about it in such a way as well. Maybe because it's very different, it's a different kind of illness. There are many people probably don't even have an opportunity to look at their relatives or loved ones before their death. All different kinds of loneliness and fear. Therefore, they would suffer greatly. But even that kind of suffering, compared to the suffering in hell realm, is still quite. There's still quite great of contrast. Therefore, even the worst kind of suffering in the human realm compared to the three lower realms, our suffering is still very scattered, very little, very tiny. Therefore, in such a way, you can think that my suffering compared to the hungry ghosts are really nothing. And in such a way, the suffering won't be so excruciating anymore for you. And then continue to think samsara is indeed an ocean of suffering, fathomless and without any end. Then turn your mind towards liberation and enlightenment. With this kind of suffering, your mind will then turn towards liberation.